An explosion rocked the Galactic Council chamber, pulverizing the podium and hurling the human ambassador Jason Johnson to the floor. Alien dignitaries scattered as Jason pushed himself up on bleeding hands, coughing dust, his eyes fixed on the menacing figure of Vorta King Xenos. The tyrant's eyes blazed with hatred, his clawed finger jabbing at the human in accusation. "This creature dares challenge my rule? Seize him!" Xenos roared. Vorta guards surged forward, wielding crackling shock staffs. Jason's implant translated the various cries rising from the council members. Calls for his arrest, pleas for reason, panicked chatter fearing Vorta reprisal. He caught snatches of his own address replaying from data cubes, his condemnation of Xenos' atrocities, his call for the council races to oppose the despot's bloody campaigns. He'd known this day might come, that his defiance could spark war between humanity and the Vorta Dominion. The Vorta controlled a third of the galaxy through conquest and terror. Their war fleets eclipsed those of the next three council races combined. But Jason would spend humanity's last breath if it meant the galaxy would be free. A Vorta guard jabbed a shock staff at Jason's head. He caught it on his bleeding palms, muscles straining as he shoved it back into the guard's startled face. The alien collapsed, spasming. More guards closed in, then froze as a lone voice cut through the chaos. "Hold!" The guards hesitated. Murmurs raced through the chamber. Zoran, decorated general of the Vorta legions, strode from behind the honor guard to stand beside Jason. The human eyed the grizzled Vorta warrior warily. Zoran's exploits were legend, 100 worlds, 1,000 massacres. But Zoran faced his king, his fists clenched, his voice heavy with conviction. "No more. The human is right. You have led our people into dishonor and ruin. I stand with him against you." As chaos engulfed the Galactic Council chamber, Zoran's hand shot to his wrist, activating a hidden teleportation device. In a flash of blinding light, he and Jason vanished, leaving the stunned Vorta guards grasping at empty air. They materialized on the bridge of a cloaked rebel ship high above the planet. Jason staggered, disoriented by the sudden transition. Zoran steadied him with a firm grip on his shoulder. "What the hell just happened?" Jason demanded, his heart pounding. Zoran met his gaze, his eyes hard with dedication. "I'm getting you out of here. There's something you need to know." As the ship accelerated away from the council world, Zoran explained the growing unrest within the Vorta military. "Your defiance today was the spark we needed," he said. "You've shown that Xenos is not invincible, that his rule can be challenged." Jason shook his head, struggling to process this sudden turn of events. "I never meant to start a rebellion. I just couldn't stay silent any longer." "Intention matters little now," Zoran said. "What matters is what we do next." News of their escape spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, Xenos' fury shook the stars themselves. He summoned Commander Crag, his most ruthless enforcer, and charged him with hunting down the fugitives at any cost. Crag wasted no time. He dispatched elite strike teams to every corner of Vorta space, activated networks of spies and informants, and placed bounties on Jason and Zoran's heads that would tempt even the most loyal citizens. As the noose tightened around them, Zoran brought Jason to a hidden rebel base on the remote planet Zephyr. There they met Arya, a brilliant Zephyrian scientist who had been working in secret to reverse engineer Vorta technology for the Resistance. Jason eyed the alien warily, his trust in Zoran not yet extending to this new ally. But as Arya showed them her work, advanced weapons, and ships that could even the odds against Xenos' war machine, he began to see the same fierce dedication that had driven him to speak out. Their respite was short-lived. Crag's forces descended on Zephyr, alerted by the increased activity around the rebel base. Arya's early warning sensors gave them just enough time to flee, escaping in a stolen Vorta stealth ship as the base erupted in flames behind them. They jumped from system to system, always one step ahead of their pursuers. In cramped ship quarters and dimly lit safe houses, they planned and plotted, reaching out to contacts on a dozen worlds in search of support for their fledgling rebellion. And across the galaxy, long-oppressed species began to stir. The whisper of Jason's defiance, of a Vorta general turned traitor for the cause of freedom, spread like a spark on a dry field. Uprisings flared on 100 worlds, the tinder of resentment igniting into the flames of open resistance. Amidst this spreading chaos, a coded transmission from an anonymous source reached the rebel ship. It promised vital intelligence that could turn the tide against Xenos, but gave no hint of its origin. Jason and Zoran traded glances as the message played out, both all too aware that it could be a trap. But Arya had already locked in the coordinates, her eyes bright with hope and trepidation. "We have to take the chance," she said softly. "We may not get another." The desolate moon where they landed held no signs of life, no hints of the promised information. As they picked their way across the barren landscape, Jason felt a growing sense of unease. Then Arya's scanner pinged, a concealed hatch set into a hillside, leading down into ancient alien ruins, and within those crumbling walls, a cache of technology beyond anything they had imagined, schematics for devastating weapons, insights into the fundamental forces that shape the universe itself. But with this discovery came new challenges. The diverse factions of the rebellion, united in their hatred of Xenos, began to splinter as they confronted the reality of wielding such godlike power. Some recoiled from the destructive potential, insisting that freedom won through such means would be tainted from the start. Others, hardened by lifetimes of oppression and suffering, clamored to unleash these weapons against their hated enemy without delay. As arguments raged and tempers flared, Jason and Zoran struggled to hold the fragile alliance together. They knew all too well that division now could doom the rebellion as surely as any Vorta fleet. But even as they fought to keep the resistance united, a more immediate threat loomed. For hidden among the rebels was a spy, reporting their every move to the merciless Commander Crag. And as the alliance prepared for its first major strike against the Vorta, Crag's forces lay in wait, ready to spring a trap that could shatter the rebellion before it truly began. The battle for the galaxy's future was about to enter a new and perilous phase, with no guarantees of survival for anyone caught in its path. The rebel ship's comm system crackled to life, startling Jason from his uneasy sleep. A gravelly voice cut through the static. Priority message for Jason Johnson. Verification code, Omega-7 Delta. Jason exchanged a wary glance with Zoran before activating the encrypted channel. "This is Johnson. Identify yourself." "Call me the broker," the voice replied. "I have information critical to your cause. Meet me on Necros Prime in 12 standard hours. Come alone." The transmission cut off abruptly. Arya's fingers flew over the console, tracing the signal's origin. "It's genuine," she confirmed, her brow furrowed. "But Necros Prime? That's a cesspit of criminal activity." Zoran growled, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "It's obviously a trap. We can't risk our leader on such a foolhardy endeavor." Jason paced the bridge, weighing their options. The rebellion teetered on a knife's edge. They needed every advantage they could get. "We can't afford to ignore potential intelligence," he decided. "I'm going." Despite his companion's protests, Jason soon found himself navigating the neon-drenched underbelly of Necros Prime. The air reeked of ozone and desperation, a cacophony of alien languages assaulting his ears. He kept one hand on his concealed blaster as he made his way to the designated meeting point. A hulking figure materialized from the shadows of a dingy alleyway. Jason tensed, ready for an ambush, but the stranger raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy, kid. I'm Dax Rogan, the broker." The man's weathered face bore the scars of 1,000 battles, his eyes sharp beneath a shock of graying hair. "We don't have much time. Your rebellion's got a mole." Jason's blood ran cold. "What? Who?" "Tyrant, that Zephyrian engineer you've got working on the alien tech. He's been feeding intel to Crag for weeks." Memories flashed through Jason's mind. Tarrick's late nights in the lab, his inexplicable setbacks with the prototype weapon. It all made sickening sense. "We need to get back to base. Now." Jason activated his wrist communicator, but only static greeted him. Dax's face went ashen. "It's already started," the mercenary growled. They commandeered a rickety shuttle, pushing its engines to the breaking point as they raced back to the rebel stronghold. But as they dropped out of hyperspace, Jason's worst fears were realized. A Vorta battle group swarmed around the planet, their weapons painting the night with sickly green fire. The rebel base was already a smoking ruin, its defenses shattered. "No," Jason whispered, his hands clenching on the controls. A familiar ship burst from the planet's atmosphere, the dreadnought they'd stolen from the Vorta months ago. Jason's comm crackled to life, Zoran's voice tight with urgency. "Jason, thank the stars, we're evacuating what's left of our forces. Rendezvous at these coordinates." As Jason maneuvered their shuttle into the dreadnought's hangar, the full scale of the disaster became clear. Hundreds of rebels crowded the decks, many wounded, all shell-shocked. Zoran and Arya rushed to meet him, relief evident on their alien features. "How bad?" Jason asked, dreading the answer. Arya's voice was hollow. "We lost over half our people. The weapon prototype is destroyed. Tarek—" "I know," Jason cut her off. "The broker told me." He nodded to Dax, who hung back warily. Before they could say more, the ship rocked violently. Cragg's forces had noticed their escape. "To your stations!" Zoran bellowed. "We're not out of this yet!" As the dreadnought, newly christened Retribution, clawed its way out of the gravity well, Jason felt the weight of command settle onto his shoulders. They'd lost so much, but surrender wasn't an option. Not with billions of lives at stake. He strode onto the bridge, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Set course for the Vorta capital. It's time we took the fight to Xenos himself." The Retribution jumped to hyperspace, leaving the smoldering remains of their base behind. But as they raced towards their final confrontation, none aboard could shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards their doom. The Retribution shuddered as it tore through the fabric of spacetime, emerging from the wormhole into the heart of the Vorta capital system. Jason's grip tightened on the command console as the imposing bulk of Xenos' flagship Harbinger filled the view screen, its planet-killer cannon glowing with ominous energy. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Jason barked. "Arya, divert all power to shields." The rebel fleet scattered as Harbinger's main cannons opened fire. Blinding beams of energy lanced through space, catching a smaller frigate and vaporizing it instantly. The Retribution rocked violently as a near-miss grazed its hull. "Shields holding at 82%, Arya reported, her fingers dancing across the controls. "But we can't take many more hits like that." Zoran's gravelly voice cut through the chaos. "I've identified a weakness in their formation. Transmitting coordinates now." Jason studied the tactical display, noting the gap in the Vorta fleet's lines. "All ships, form up on the Retribution. We're punching through." The rebel fleet surged forward, weathering a storm of turbo-laser fire. Explosions blossomed in space as ships on both sides fell to the onslaught. But inch by bloody inch, they closed the distance to Harbinger. "Sir!" Arya's voice was tight with urgency. "The planet killer is powering up." Jason's mind raced. They couldn't let that weapon fire. "Dax, prep a strike team. We're going in." Minutes later, Jason found himself strapped into an assault shuttle, the hull vibrating as it dodged streams of enemy fire. Dax piloted with preternatural skill, weaving between larger ships and debris. 30 seconds to contact, Dax growled. "Hope those charges of yours pack a punch, kid." Jason checked his gear one last time. "They'll do the job. Just get us close enough." The shuttle skimmed Harbinger's surface, close enough that Jason could see individual armor plates. He slapped the release on the cargo bay, sending high-yield cyclonic charges tumbling onto the flagship's hull. "Charges away," Jason shouted. "Get us out of here." Dax yanked the controls, sending the shuttle into a stomach-churning roll away from Harbinger. Behind them, the charges detonated in a chain reaction of blinding explosions. The planet-killer cannon fired, its beam going wide and dissipating harmlessly into space. "Direct hit," Arya's voice crackled over the comm. "Harbinger's main gun is offline." Jason allowed himself a grim smile. "All ships, concentrate fire on their wounded flank. Let's finish this." The rebel fleet unleashed its full fury. Missiles and plasma bursts hammered Harbinger's weakened defenses, peeling away layers of armor. But the massive ship refused to die. its broadside batteries turning ponderously to face the attackers. "We need to end this now," Zoran growled. "I'm taking the bombers in. Cover us." Jason watched from the shuttle as Zoran led a squadron of sleek Starhawks on a daring attack run. They dove past Harbinger's defensive screen, releasing their payload of penetrator ordnance. The explosives burrowed deep into the flagship's hull before detonating. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a series of massive explosions rippled across Harbinger's flank. Arya's voice cut through the cheers on the command frequency. "Detecting massive energy fluctuations. Their antimatter containment is failing." Jason's blood ran cold. If Harbinger's core breached, the resulting explosion would vaporize everything for light years. There was no time to outrun the blast. "Arya," he shouted, "the experimental drive. Can you get it online?" "It's untested," she protested. "We could end up anywhere or nowhere." "We're out of options," Jason said grimly. "Do it." The Retribution's engines howled as the experimental transwarp drive engaged. Reality itself seemed to twist and bend around them as a shimmering wormhole enveloped the rebel ships. Behind them, Harbinger detonated in a silent, devastating flash of pure energy. The wormhole collapsed, spitting them out into an unfamiliar star system. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems struggled to realign. "Damage report," Jason called out, pulling himself to his feet. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, Arya responded. "Sealing now. Weapon systems offline, but we're alive." A sudden crackle of static interrupted the damage assessment. A transmission, heavily encrypted, forcing its way through their comms. "Attention rebel forces," a cold, familiar voice intoned. "This is the Royal Guard of His Majesty, Emperor Xenos. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is futile." Jason's heart sank. Somehow, the Tyrant had survived. Before he could respond, the transmission cut out, replaced by the unmistakable whine of descent thrusters. He rushed to the viewport, his eyes widening at the sight before him. A swarm of Vorta troop landers streaked towards the undefended Azure world below. Xenos had found them, even here in the depths of uncharted space. "All hands to battle stations," Jason ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "This is it, the final stand." As klaxons blared throughout the ship, Jason knew the true test was just beginning. The fate of the stars would be decided on the surface of that alien world, and he would be damned if he'd let Xenos win without the fight of his life. Jason's eyes narrowed as he watched the Vorta trooplanders streak towards the planet's surface. The Azure world below, moments ago a symbol of hope, now loomed as their potential grave. "We can't let them establish a beachhead," he said, turning to Zoran. "How many ground units can we deploy?" The alien's mandibles clicked in frustration. 3 platoons, at most. Our heavy equipment was lost in the jump." Arya's fingers flew over the tactical display. "I've identified a defensible ridge near our crash site. If we can get our remaining ground forces there..." The ship rocked violently, cutting her off. A proximity alarm blared. "Vorta destroyers entering orbit," Dax shouted from the weapons station. "Our shields can't take much more of this." Jason gripped the command rail, his fingers tightening. "Evacuate all personnel to the surface. We make our stand on that ridge." Within minutes, the rebel forces poured from the crippled Retribution. Shuttles and drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, racing the descending Vorta landers. Jason's pod slammed into the rich soil, its retro thrusters kicking up a cloud of alien pollen. He emerged to chaos. The air crackled with energy weapons fire as the first waves of Vorta shock troops hit the ground. Across the verdant plain, geysers of dirt erupted where plasma bolts found their mark. "To the ridge!" Jason bellowed, waving his troops forward. "Move it, people!" They sprinted across the alien landscape, dodging patches of strange, luminescent flora. A Vorta dropship roared overhead, disgorging a fresh squad of troops. Jason took aim with his rifle, the recoil jarring his shoulder as he dropped 2 enemies. Zoran appeared at his side, plasma caster spitting death. "We're cut off from the main force!" Jason scanned the battlefield, his heart sinking. The Vorta advance was relentless, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the scattered rebel units. He keyed his comm. All squads fall back to secondary positions. Regroup at these coordinates. As they retreated, Jason's mind raced. A defensive action was suicide. They needed a bold stroke to turn the tide. His gaze settled on a distant Vorta command shuttle touching down amidst the chaos. Xenos. Zoran, Arya, Dax, on me, he ordered. I need our best. We're taking the fight to that bastard himself. They commandeered a battered rebel groundcrawler, its armor plates scarred from orbital re-entry. Jason gunned the engine, plowing through the underbrush as enemy fire pinged off the hull. This is madness, Dax growled, manning the top-mounted cannon. We'll never make it through their lines. Jason's grip tightened on the controls. We don't have a choice. It's Xenos or nothing. The crawler burst from the tree line into the heart of the Vorta landing zone. Dax's cannon roared, cutting down waves of enemy troops. But for each one that fell, two more seemed to take their place. There, Arya shouted, pointing to a heavily fortified compound. Xenos' energy signature. He's inside. Jason nodded grimly. Strap in. This is going to get rough. He floored the accelerator, aiming the crawler directly at the compound's energy barrier. Alarms blared as the shields flared, threatening to disintegrate them on impact. At the last possible second, Jason triggered the vehicle's armor-piercing rockets. The barrier shattered in a blinding flash. The crawler smashed through, tumbling end over end before coming to rest in a smoking heap. Jason dragged himself from the wreckage, his ears ringing. Go! He shouted to his dazed companions. Find Xenos! They charged into the compound, weapons blazing. Vorta guards fell before their desperate assault, but the cost was steep. One by one, Jason watched his comrades fall to enemy fire. And then, through the smoke and chaos, he saw him. Xenos stood in the center of a grand courtyard, sneering as he beckoned with his ritual blade. So this is the vaunted human insolence, the Tyrant called out. Come then, if you dare face oblivion. Jason raised his rifle and charged, roaring his defiance. The hope of the universe hung in the balance as he closed the distance, ready to end Xenos' reign once and for all.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.